I still remember the silence in that meeting room. The way everyone avoided my eyes when he said it. "We have reason to believe you took the money." My boss, David Turner, said it slowly, like he'd been rehearsing the line for weeks. The company's finance reports were on the screen behind him, numbers highlighted in red, and somehow, my name was threaded through every accusation. I'd given 5 years of my life to that place. Stayed late. Covered for him when he used the company card for client dinners that never existed. And now he was sitting there, acting like I was the thief. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just sat there, watching the man who'd built his career on lies try to destroy mine, and in that silence, something inside me hardened. He thought he'd humiliated me. But all he did was sign his own downfall. I made a promise right then: I'd burn his reputation to the ground, using his own words. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I love seeing where my stories reach around the world. The first thing I noticed was how calm his voice was. David always spoke like he owned the air in the room, slow, deliberate, confident. "We've reviewed the numbers," he said, eyes flicking toward the finance director. "There are discrepancies." He didn't look at me at first. He let the silence stretch until it felt like a noose. Then, "And those discrepancies trace back to your logins, Ethan." Everyone turned. I could hear the clock on the wall, that cheap plastic tick echoing louder than my pulse. I'd been there since the company was just 6 people in a rented office above a coffee shop. I built the client files, stayed through weekends, fixed the messes he left behind after his client trips. So hearing him say my name in that tone, like I was dirt under his shoe, hit harder than I expected. I remember glancing at the folder in front of him. My expense approvals. My name highlighted in yellow. But the receipts? Wrong vendors. Wrong dates. He'd planted them so neatly it almost looked professional. "I'm sorry you feel blindsided," he said. "But we have to act responsibly." I said nothing. I just looked at him, at the man who'd once told me I was his right hand. Behind him, on the projector, the word fraud glowed in red text. I didn't defend myself. Not because I couldn't, but because I finally understood. This wasn't about evidence. It was about removing me before I saw too much. When the meeting ended, I gathered my things. No one met my eyes. And as I walked out, I whispered something so quiet I doubt the cameras picked it up. "Your emails will bury you." The nights at the office had a smell: stale coffee, printer toner, and the faint citrus of whatever cleaning spray David pretended to like. I learned to love those hours because they were honest. No performative goodbyes, no patronizing pats on the shoulder, just me and the spreadsheets that whispered the company's true shape. I slept under my desk more than once. I learned clients' nicknames, the passwords to 3 different services, and how to fix a server before the IT team could say a prayer. David sold swagger like it was a product. He ordered lobster for celebratory dinners and logged them as client entertainment. He called late at night insisting I sign off on things because he trusted me. I trusted him back. That was the real stupid thing. He made a habit of asking me to rubber stamp reimbursements, to forward invoices to accounts payable with a note: urgent, clear. At first the lies were small and useful: an inflated mileage here, a padded hotel tab there. I'd roll my eyes, file the receipts, and move on. The little deceptions were a lubrication for the machine. Everyone did it, or so I told myself. But the late nights let me see the pattern beneath the grease. The same vendor names that never answered the phone. Expense entries for clients that didn't exist. PDFs labeled with dates that didn't match the metadata. When HR brought me in for the first informal chat, I laughed it off. I still thought there was room for a rational conversation. Then came the audit notes and the rewritten logs, and the calm way David reorganized the narrative. He'd turned our shared history into disposable props: the dinners, the trips, the favors. I kept replaying his soft voice telling me I was a team player. It stung because it used to be a compliment. I started keeping my own files, a quiet archive of the small things nobody else thought to save. Screenshots, emails, timestamps. Little things that felt insignificant until you stacked them in a folder and the shape of a lie emerged. That's how betrayal begins, not with a blow, but with a string of tiny, practical untruths that, when woven together, make a noose. It started with one email. Just one. A forwarded invoice from a consultant I'd never heard of, attached to a reimbursement request David asked me to approve quickly before accounting closes. Normally I wouldn't have thought twice, but the total caught my eye: $7,480. Exact to the cent, like someone had done math instead of spending money. I searched the consultant's name through our system. Nothing. Checked LinkedIn. Nothing. Google turned up a clothing boutique in Ohio that hadn't posted since 2018. My stomach sank. That night, I stayed after everyone left. The office lights buzzed, pale and lonely. I opened the shared drive, cross-referencing every invoice David had pushed through in the last 6 months. Vendor names started repeating. Email addresses didn't match the company domains they claimed to represent. Some were Gmail accounts, one even from Yahoo, the kind of carelessness that only comes from arrogance. By midnight, I knew. The missing funds, the errors, the sudden accusations against me, they were a smokescreen. He was moving money through fake vendors and needed someone disposable to take the fall when the audit hit. I leaned back in my chair, staring at his last email. Thanks, Ethan. Always appreciate your reliability. My hands shook. I wanted to scream, to storm into his office, to show everyone the proof. But no, that's what he'd expect. Instead, I created a new folder. Password protected. Hidden. Inside it, I started saving every single thread that could unravel him. Not just evidence, leverage. And as the sun began to rise over the city, turning the glass buildings orange and gold, I realized something chillingly clear. He hadn't just framed me. He'd taught me exactly how to destroy him. I learned that revenge doesn't begin with rage, it begins with silence. After that night, I stopped arguing, stopped defending myself. I just started watching. Every time David called a private meeting, I noted the time. Every transaction he signed off on, I saved a copy before he edited it. Every sarcastic smile he threw my way became another entry in the quiet file I was building against him. He thought I was broken. That was the beauty of it. He'd walk past my desk, clap a hand on my shoulder, and say things like, "Hang in there, Ethan, the truth always comes out." And I'd smile back, nodding like a beaten dog. But behind that screen, my inbox was a war zone of forwarded messages, time-stamped approvals, and little details that didn't belong in any honest man's career. The deeper I dug, the more patterns emerged: fake vendors, inflated reimbursements, ghost clients billed for consulting packages. It wasn't sloppy. It was a system, one he'd perfected over years. Sometimes, at night, I'd read his emails just to hear his tone again, smug, self-satisfied, the voice of a man who thought he was untouchable. I started to understand the psychology of it. He didn't just want to win. He wanted to own everyone who stood near him. By week 3, my folder had grown too large to hide on the company drive. So I moved it off-site, a flash drive in my jacket pocket, encrypted and renamed Client Notes. I knew if he found out, he'd destroy me completely. But the fear was starting to change shape. It wasn't fear of losing my job anymore. It was fear of stopping before I saw it through. That's when I realized I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was preparing an execution. The whisper came from the copier room, the safest place in any office for gossip to hide. 2 managers stood by the machine, pretending to talk about toner levels while quietly dismantling my future. "HR's finalizing it this week," one of them said. "Termination for cause," the other replied. "Turner wants it handled quietly." Turner. They didn't even call him David anymore. When you're that high up, your first name becomes currency. I walked past them slowly, pretending not to hear, but the words echoed in my skull. Termination for cause. That meant no severance, no reference, nothing. Just a black mark I'd never scrub off. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed. A message from David. "Need you in the boardroom at 4. Quick update." I stared at it for a long time. 4 hours until my execution, and he still had the arrogance to call it an update. When I walked in, the board was already seated. Smiles, the professional kind, empty and sharp. David stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, performing calm authority. "As you know," he began, "our internal audit raised concerns about recent financial irregularities. Unfortunately, they're tied to one of our senior staff." He didn't even look at me when he said it. He let the room fill with that sickly silence again. I could feel their eyes, pity from a few, judgment from the rest. Then, halfway through his speech, I did something that wasn't in his script. I opened my laptop. The projector flickered. A single email appeared on the screen, one from David to a fake vendor address. The subject line, "Same routing info." Push it through fast. For a second, no one breathed. Then I closed the laptop, smiled politely, and said, "Sorry, wrong file." The boardroom fell into a different kind of silence, heavier, curious, suspicious. David's jaw tightened just enough to betray him. I walked out without another word. The whisper had been right, they were going to fire me. But now, the board was whispering about him, too. The first leak wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. I sent one email, one single thread, from an anonymous address to the board's internal audit team. No explanation, no subject line, just a forward. From David Turner. To redacted vendor address. Same routing info. Push it through fast. We'll handle the paperwork later. That was it. 23 words. I waited. Days passed. Nothing. Then, on a Wednesday morning, the office atmosphere shifted. You could feel it, the quiet unease that spreads before bad weather hits. People avoided David's office. The finance director kept her door closed. The HR manager started taking calls in the hallway, whispering into her phone like someone might be listening. David tried to act normal. Still clapped my shoulder in front of others, still told me we'd sort everything out soon. But I could see it in his eyes now, that flicker of doubt, that small twitch when his phone buzzed and he didn't know who was watching. By Friday, another email went out, this time to the entire board. A clarification request about past reimbursements. My fingerprints weren't on it, but I recognized the phrasing from the documents I'd collected. Someone in audit had seen the thread and started pulling strings of their own. That's when I realized how power actually collapses, not in explosions, but in whispers, in quiet forwarded emails that drain the air from a man's confidence. At lunch, I passed David in the hallway. He smiled too hard. "Everything okay?" I asked, voice steady. He hesitated, then forced a laugh. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" I shrugged. "No reason. You just look distracted." His jaw locked. "Be careful, Ethan." I smiled. "You too, David." As I walked away, I checked my phone. A single line reply from one of the board members blinked on the screen. "We need to talk. Privately." The first leak had landed. The tide was turning. The board member's name was Helen Granger, Chief Financial Officer, known for her steel composure and for never, ever wasting a word. When she said, "We need to talk," I knew the ground beneath David Turner had finally cracked. We met after hours in her office. The city outside was half lit, the kind of dim that made reflections more visible than the skyline. She didn't bother with small talk. "You sent those emails, didn't you?" I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just slid a flash drive across the desk, the one I'd carried in my jacket for weeks. "Everything you need is on there," I said quietly. "Fake vendors. Transactions. His authorization signatures. Metadata on every file." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. "If this is real, Ethan, he's done." "It's real," I said. I was the one he used to sign off on his lies. The next week was chaos disguised as order. HR acted busy. Legal sat in closed meetings. The board called for a special review of financial activity, and David, for the first time, started coming in late. His confidence evaporated fast, the sharp suits were replaced by rumpled jackets, his morning greetings turned into curt nods. By Wednesday, whispers turned to open stares. The office that once bowed to him now studied him like a wounded animal. Then came the call, a full board meeting scheduled for Friday morning. No agenda listed. That night, I stayed at the office late again. Not to spy this time, just to sit in the quiet and breathe. I'd thought exposing him would feel triumphant, but it didn't. It felt cold. Like the end of a long illness. As I packed my things, a single email appeared in my inbox. From David. Subject line, "Talk. Tonight." No greeting. No punctuation. Just that one word that reeked of desperation. He knew. And now, he wanted to face me. He waited for me in his office, blinds half drawn, tie loosened, the smell of whiskey thick in the air. I didn't knock, I just walked in and closed the door behind me. "You've been busy," he said, leaning back in his chair. The smile was still there, but it had lost its anchor. His hands wouldn't stop moving, fingers tapping, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. I didn't answer. I let the silence settle, same way he used to when he wanted to make me squirm. Funny how power flips, same silence, different victim. He exhaled, long and shaky. "You think you're clever, huh? Sending half-truths to the board? You have no idea what kind of damage you're doing." I said, "You did that part yourself." He slammed a hand on the desk, the sound echoing off the glass. "You think they'll believe you over me? You're nothing here. I built this place." I stepped closer. "Then you should have built it on something other than stolen money." For a moment, he just stared at me, and I saw it, the crack in the armor. The man who'd been untouchable for years was finally cornered. His arrogance had nowhere left to go. By Monday, it wasn't whispers anymore. It was headlines. Internal audit leaked to the press, the story broke on a business blog by noon. Senior executive under investigation for fraudulent accounting practices. They didn't name him yet, but everyone knew. He walked the halls like a ghost, while board members spoke in private clusters. HR avoided his office entirely. Every time his phone rang, he'd flinch. For weeks, he'd made me feel like I didn't exist, like my voice carried no weight. Now, he couldn't take a single step without feeling eyes on him. That's the thing about pressure, it doesn't explode right away. It builds, quietly, painfully, until it crushes everything that thought it could stand above it. And David Turner was starting to crack. It happened on a Thursday, the night before the board's final meeting. Most people had gone home. The office was quiet, just the low hum of air vents and the city breathing outside the glass. I was at my desk clearing the last of my files when I heard the door to David's office open behind me. "Ethan," he said. No title. No tone of command left in his voice. Just my name. I turned slowly. He looked smaller somehow, suit wrinkled, tie gone, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "They're going to fire me tomorrow," he said. "You know that, right?" I didn't reply. He walked closer, pacing like a man rehearsing his own eulogy. "Do you even know what happens after that? The press, the blacklisting, the investigations. I'll be finished." "You should have thought of that before you framed me," I said. He stopped, looking at me like he couldn't believe I'd spoken to him that way. "I made you," he snapped. "You wouldn't have had a career without me." I stood. "And now you don't have one because of me." He laughed, bitter, desperate. "You think you're the hero here? You think the board cares about truth? They'll eat both of us alive. You're a liability, Ethan." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm the one who brought receipts." For a moment, we just stared at each other, 5 years of loyalty, silence, and slow rot collapsing into that single room. He tried to speak again, but the words wouldn't come. I picked up my bag, walked past him, and paused at the door. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "you'll understand what accountability feels like." When I left, I glanced back once through the glass wall. He was standing there in the dim light, staring at his own reflection. For the first time, he looked like what he truly was, a man about to be publicly erased by his own deceit. And for the first time since that meeting, I finally breathed. The board meeting lasted less than an hour. I wasn't in the room, I didn't need to be. By the time the doors opened, the decision was already written across their faces. David came out last, carrying nothing but his phone. His ID badge hung loose from his fingers. No one said a word to him. Security didn't even touch him, they just walked a few paces behind as he crossed the lobby, the same lobby where he used to stand, shaking hands, smiling for photo ops. He didn't look at anyone. Didn't speak. Just stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed quietly behind him. An internal memo went out that afternoon. Effective immediately, David Turner has resigned from his position as Chief Operations Officer due to personal reasons. Personal reasons. That's what they call it when a man's empire collapses. The press release hit 2 days later. Executive misconduct exposed in major financial firm. This time, they used his full name. The comments online were brutal. People he'd fired, people he'd humiliated, people who'd been waiting years for karma to show up. A week later, I was called into a private meeting with the board. They thanked me for my discretion, offered a position in compliance. I declined. I didn't want a promotion built on someone else's ashes, even if he deserved it. On my last day, I walked past his old office. It was empty. The nameplate was gone. The glass still had a faint handprint near the door, his, maybe, from that final night. Outside, the city looked the same as it always had. But it wasn't. Not for him. Not for me. I didn't ruin his life, he did that himself. I just made sure everyone finally saw it. And that was enough.